Hello, PewterCast listeners, and welcome to a special edition of Training Camp Journals with Ren. Fan on the couch. Practice was closed today to the general public because the Buccaneers were saluting the military with a Military Appreciation Day. Active military members and family members were allowed to practice. It was a little rainy, but today was the first day of pads on. This is where the offensive line, really starts to get after it. Running backs can sort of show what they're made of, and the news was hot and heavy coming out of one buck. So Brent contacted me, and he said that you're not there, but there's no reason you really can't do one. And it took me about 5 seconds to agree, and I'm like, yeah, the stuff coming out of camp was too good sort of to wait till Wednesday. So this is going to be sort of a different podcast. What I did was I went over the Twitter accounts and pretty much scoured them of the heavy hitters of the people who cover the Bucks. Peter Report, Trevor Sikkema, Joe Bucks fan, Greg Allman, Roy Cummings, What the Buck, Riley Allman, and of course Buccaneers.com. And anything that I found worthy, that I found interesting, I'm going to go ahead and go over it with you. So obviously, this isn't what I saw from fans in the stands. This is a fans on the couch episode. But once again, since it was the first time you really got to hear or see what the videos are out on Twitter about, these players that you've been kind of waiting to see where they would progress or how they would do, as close as to real football you're going to get until an actual preseason game. We wanted to talk about it, so so here we go. I started out, first out, these are just some storylines that are continuing, and some things that, came out of Bucks that really didn't have to do with play on the field. I guess the most important one would be Chris Baker was held out. Everyone said he was sitting on the sidelines and had ice on his knee or on his leg. If you're a fan of Ira Kaufman and his podcast there on Joe Bucks Fan, he was the first to sort of, well, probably, and the only one that I've heard. He was the one that he got a quote from. He never really said the name, a reputable source in the Redskins organization where Chris Baker came from, and said, great player, doesn't like to practice. Chris Baker didn't show up for a lot of the OTAs. He did show up for minicamp, but of course OTAs are voluntary. And, and it's day one of pads, and he's over there on the sidelines, ice his leg. So we'll have to see how this goes. He might be one of those guys that Ira might be right. He just doesn't like to practice. But if the first part of the statement holds up, where he's a good player, then I guess that's just something we're going to have to get used to, and we'll see how it goes. If it becomes extremely evident that he's always taking practices off, especially early in the year, late in the year, that the Bucks likes to start getting veteran days to the guys that really don't need the practice, guys that have been in the league like 6 plus years. They get a veterans day, sort of, because they're older. They let their body recoup, sort of an extra body get healthy day, and the Bucks did that a lot. They did with Gerald McCoy a lot last year, Robert Ayers sometimes last year. Those are the guys I can think of off the top of my head. So as of now, no story. And we'll see how it comes on Wednesday. Tomorrow there is no practice. It's a body recovery day. Everyone has a day off, so they'll be back at it with pads on Wednesday. Another big news. This was sort of took off for about 20 minutes, a half hour, maybe an hour, on Twitter about Jameis Winston and his leg brace. He had it off today. When he originally had it on, some people had said that he has a limp. I remember when Jameis Winston first came, we always thought he had a limp. He just sort of had that, for lack of a better term, a pimp walk. He just always sort of had that look like, his foot or his knee or his hip, and, one part on the right side of his body was sort of bothering him, but that's just kind of like the way he walks. And, Bucks came out and said, it's more a precautionary thing. He did throw 3 picks yesterday, so maybe he just didn't like it. I know that's total speculation on my part. But he wasn't wearing it today, and there was really Dirk Cutter was actually asked during a press conference about it, and he even joked about, I hope this is the main storyline throughout training camp. And so no one really knows what's going on with that. But just to keep you up on knee brace gate, Jameis, yeah, he ditched the knee brace for today. And thirdly, I know I've been talking, we're starting off the podcast talking about Gerald McCoy's themed cleats, and I reached out to, I know it was silly, and it was pretty much what I said in my tweet. I'm like, oh, this is silly, but I need to know what are the themed cleats, because on Gerald McCoy social media account, I believe it was Instagram, you could see the Hulk cleats, and you could see the Wolverine cleats, you could see the Batman and Joker set of cleats. One I believe left foot was Batman, right foot was Joker. The one in the furthest behind was sort of behind all those other three sets of cleats, and you couldn't really tell. I saw a little bit of a skull and flames. It might have been a lightning bolt, so I'm sort of speculating to be Flash and Ghost Rider. So I tweeted out to Trevor. I tagged Trevor, Greg Hogman, Riley, and Derek Fournier at What the Buck. And luckily, McCoy was right in front of Riley and Greg Hogman, and they said no theme cleats today. So maybe he was, didn't want to get him because it was a downpour today. If you don't know, a tropical storm came through the Bay Area early this morning, late last night, and the rain sort of kept going. If you're not from Florida, don't let the word tropical storm really, scare you. It's basically just a summer Florida thunderstorm or a little shower, but instead of lasting 10 minutes, it lasts for an hour or two. Normally in the summer, like once a day, it goes from bright sunshine and it starts to drizzle a bit, and then within 5 minutes, you think your house is going to blow down, and then 5 minutes after that, it's sunshine again. The only difference between that we get like almost every single day and a tropical storm is that part where you think your house is going to blow down. It's really not that serious. It's just heavy rain. The difference between that, it just lasts for an hour or two instead of just the whole thing lasting 10-15 minutes. So if you ever see tropical storm, don't worry about it. You don't have to. If you have relatives down here, you don't have to worry about it. The streets flood a little bit in some places in the city, but besides that, there's really nothing much to it. You gotta knock your grocery shopping back an hour or two. All right, moving on. Things that caught my eye. J.J. Wilcox continued to flash today. He got a second interception. There's some video out there on social media about that. They have been working him at slot and safety, so it's good to see, as I was saying yesterday, that you could have a player that can sort of fill two roster spots, which would open up, fill two positions on the roster spot. Sort of if you can fill backup safety and backup nickel, that frees the roster spot up. A couple of other guys that are doing sort of double duty. There was a lot of talk about Ryan Smith moving to cornerback this year. But also, it looks like Josh Robinson, the outstanding gunner, special teams gunner, is playing almost exclusively safety. He's been a cornerback for the first 3 or 4 years in the league, so he could possibly also be double dipping, doing two duties there. And also, Judaje Barima seems to be running with the second team at cornerback, at outside corner. So I'm assuming the second outside corners right now are Ryan Smith and Judaje Barima. So with Jude being able to play, nickel, because we've seen it, we know he can, an outside corner, and then Josh Robinson doing safety and corner, and now we have Wilcox doing safety and nickel corner. With all those guys being that versatile, if they're good enough at both positions and the Bucs feel comfortable enough, that could open one roster spot, two roster spots, three roster spots, where they could hang on to a fifth running back or a fifth tight end or a third string quarterback. So that's something to keep your eye on looking forward. Once again, Doug Martin is running with the first teams. I know that quote that came out that I talked a little bit about yesterday's episode, that his starting job isn't promised to him, and it shouldn't be. And I think even if you read a little more into it, there was some kind of quote where it was like, there's no guarantee, of course I'm paraphrasing, there's no guarantee that Doug Martin will even be on the team, and that's true, but there's no guarantee that anybody's going to be on the team. Of course, players like, Evans, Winston, McCoy, Quan, the guys at the top of your head that you think, like, they're not going to lose their starting position. Nothing they can do. But there is, if they go out and I don't want to get dark, but there's crimes that can be committed that these people will not be on the team. So I don't really see anybody that can be guaranteed a position. I guess you could take a look at it. The way I feel about it, it's just sort of Jason Light reiterating, because it was national media. You could be throwing it out there where sort of putting pressure on Doug Martin that'll start to get questions about this, that he needs to keep it on the straight and narrow. I'm still in the camp that when I hear Jason Light and Dirk Cutter say that you don't get rid of good football players, and if you're mad at Doug Martin for what he did last year, and you haven't forgiven him yet, and you want him off the team just because of that, I don't think that's really going to happen. You really can't argue that Doug Martin's not a good football player. So, he's the best running back they have. Let's face it. Every running back on the roster has some sort of red flag or a shortcoming, I should say. And Doug's is the least. I mean, obviously his is a big red flag with the PED suspension. And once again, if he gets caught, he's in drug protocol right now. If he gets caught again within a year, he loses. He'll lose up to 8 games, and then I think the decision will be made easy for the Buccaneers. But if he keeps on the straight and narrow, I still think he's going to be back week 4. So, and if Jason Light was sort of saying that there's no guarantee you're going to be here, then why is the team wasting these first reps on him? Why aren't they putting somebody in to the first rep team that they think the next person in line? So if they have plans for Doug Martin not to be on the team after the preseason, and they don't want him back after the first 3 games, then why do they keep wasting these first team reps on him? So I just don't think it all adds up. And those are my thoughts on it. Return of the tunnel screen. I also talked a little about this yesterday, how Adam Humphries, especially the first 2 weeks, they did this tunnel screen, and it would break off for big yardage and big plays, explosive plays for the Bucs offense. And I think every single person tweeted out that video of that tunnel screen that seemed to work, and Donovan Smith was getting downfield and actually I think got on a cornerback and sort of sprung Hump for a big gain. So tunnel screen's still in the offense's repertoire, and it seems to be they're working on early. I also talked about how Mike Evans and Brent Grimes are really going at it. Like, these guys are at the top of their game, both all pros. Well, not yet. Both Pro Bowlers. And, iron sharpens iron, they like to say. But Evans had a high point ball over Grimes on one of the only deep passes from what I could pick up today. Winston laid it up, and it was a little short, but he put it, where Grimes couldn't get it. Grimes can jump out of the building, but Mike has little hops too. He played organized basketball, and he's 6'6", so he's already got like a 8 inch start on Brent Grimes. So it was good to see those guys go at it. It's just fun to see the guys that are the best of the best really compete against each other and putting all out effort. Tevin Westbrook, the tight end that I've been talking about, and Derek Fournier from Old School seems to be backing as well as his underdog player, the guy to watch. Apparently he looked really good in these blocking drills. At one point, I believe it said he stopped Levante David pretty easily and then stoned some defensive end on his next rep. So that's good to hear, because if he's going to make the team, he's probably going to make it on his blocking ability over his passing ability, because he's still very raw. But once again, real athletic guy. I've kind of had my eye on him starting last year. At the beginning, like this time last year, was a guy I was sort of looking to make the team because the tight ends were sort of wide open. You had ASJ and you had Cameron Brate. And then, you know, he had Luke Stocker, but besides that, it was really wide open. You had Brandon Myers return, but Alan Cross was an undrafted free agent. He ended up making the team, but Tevin Westbrook, they've been stashing him on, like I said in a couple of previous podcasts, they've been stashing him on the practice squad for the past 2 years. I really feel it's a make it or break it season for him, but apparently he had a real good showing in some blocking drills today. Second team offensive line. This was sort of interesting because they're probably going to keep 9-8 guys somewhere around there, and it's really not surprising. It was just a little bit where a couple guys were surprising in where they were playing. Left tackle was Wester. Then Evan Smith played guard. Joe Holly's the backup center. Josh Allen was the backup right guard, who Donovan Smith and Ali Marpet last year on the radio show said he was probably the strongest of the offensive linemen due to how many reps he could do on the bench or how much weight he could push up on the bench. And then, of course, they quickly pointed out that his arms are the shortest, so it's easiest for him as well. That's just the way it goes against guys that compete. And then Caleb Betnock was actually out on right tackle. He played left tackle and right guard, and even played a little bit of center at UCLA, and his projection has been to play guard. He actually got in some games last year, and I believe got a start. I think was it the Kansas City game? Right in there, because Panfil got hurt, and then Evan Smith got hurt. Panfil was hurt and out for a game, and then, like, the first series, Evan Smith got hurt, so they had to put in Betnock. So that's where he got his experience last year, and it was like, so he played most of one game and then started the next game, and Derek Cutter said that he really improved from game 1 to game 2, but his game 1 performance really wasn't that great. So it's not, we're not talking this guy's going to be competing for a starting job this year, but it's good to have that O-line depth, and it's prevalent that he's cross-training there. And to finish that off was, like I said, it was Military Appreciation Day. It seems like every player made an effort to go over to the fence and sign for the fans today. There were lots of videos about that, about different players going over there. All the heavy hitters. I saw one video where Donovan Smith was actually in the stands, sort of like Gerald McCoy does, and he sits down, everyone signs. But he was sort of walking around and making a joke and yelling at Jude Aje-Barima, who was on the other side of the fence signing for fans. He was acting like he was a fan. He was like, "Jude, sign my shirt, sign my shirt." So you hear these. Donovan Smith was on Good Morning Football today, and you keep hearing this over and over. It officially started with Gerald McCoy. His interview after the first practice was about how tight this group is, from top to bottom, and there's not really offense, defense, things like that. It sounds like the locker room's really loose because they're all really good friends, and everybody's making jokes. So, and you know that when you get together with 2, 3, 4 of your very good friends, you don't talk about politics. There's really no serious conversations going on. You're sort of busting each other's balls and making cracks and talking, just kind of telling everybody what's going on with their life, and but it's always very light, very breezy, and very fun, and it seems like that's what the locker room's like. So that brings us to a section today I'm going to call Rookie Recap. Sort of everything that's happened with the drafted rookies and a couple of the undrafted free agents that have come to light. Sort of how they're doing, not necessarily just the highlights, but how they're doing in camp. Just going to go right down the draft list. So starting first is O.J. Howard. He had a rough day catching the ball. I guess he had 3 reported drops. As I reported earlier, it was very wet and rainy. I've been to the first 3 practices, and there's been plenty of drops by plenty of wide receivers. So I don't think that's really anything to worry about so much. But he also seems to be flourishing in the 11-on-11 drills on the blocking side of the ball. Apparently, he had no problem handling Noah Spence off the edge, one-on-one, and he's looking, from all reports, he's looking really good as far as, like I said, the 11-on-11s where now there's actually contact that, at least as far as the blocking part, he's everything that's advertised. And I can tell you from the first three practices, he just looks smoother than the other tight ends. I don't know if it's a confidence thing or what, but he just looks a little faster. His routes look a little smoother. The ball sort of like sticks to his hands instead of like actually have to catch it. It's almost like you always hear that adage, his hands are like Velcro, but it was for the few drills that I saw him run the first 3 days. That was what I saw, and then of course he made that circus catch just yesterday, a one-handed, spinning grab, diving, falling to his feet. So the blocking really shined today. He did have a few drops in the rain, but I would say that the Bucs are pleased with where he's at right now. Second round draft pick, Justin Evans. He's been quiet. Even today with pads on, I wasn't there. I've been watching the safeties a lot because it's a four-man race, and we all know it. There's Wilcox, who's been shining out. There's Conte, who's actually shined as well. Looks much more consistent than he has the first couple of years he's been with Tampa Bay. But Tandy and Evans have both been sort of, they just haven't made any splash plays. And with safeties, you got to basically have to do a pass breakup or an interception, and that's what you consider a splash play. So Justin Evans has been quiet, but it's better than, him not being quiet, I guess. If you're not going to make a splash play, at least you're not getting talked about as your coverage is bad. So he missed all of the OTAs. He did a little bit of rookie practice, but he missed all of the OTAs, so he's a little bit behind, and he's been quiet as far as news coming out of One Buck for the first 3 days and today. But I don't think it's anything to worry about as of yet. Kendall Beckwith confirmed that he is learning the Sam and Mike linebacker positions. I talked about how he wasn't coming in as the second string Sam yesterday. He was coming in as a second string Mike, and I thought maybe that was because the Mike linebacker is going to get a lot more reps than the Sam linebacker, so they want to make sure and get him on the field. So it looks like he's being cross-training. I guess you could go with that theory's working, but he's definitely competing. I think he's competing for the starting Sam spot, and he's going to be, if he doesn't win that spot, he's going to be sort of the next man up behind Quan Alexander if anything happens to him. I don't know if you heard that, but yeah, if anything happens to Quan, I think the whole fan base is going to go in the dumps. This a little bit out of order. It was same round though. Chris Godwin. He got some first-team reps today, and apparently he impressed. He's everything that's been advertised that you heard in OTAs that he's shining out. The first 3 days I was there, I believe his body control is unbelievable, and every practice he seems to be making some catch that most receivers don't. I even went as far as to say that I would be extremely comfortable if the Buccaneers didn't have Deshaun Jackson and didn't pick up a wide receiver in free agency. I would be extremely comfortable having Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Adam Humphries as our starting three. Now, of course, it's much better with Deshaun Jackson here with the depth and the speed and the explosiveness, and he opens up the playbook. But that's how impressive Chris Godwin has been early on. That brings us to Jeremy McNichols. This is the first day where the running backs really get to show their stuff. If the 7-on-7s, well, I shouldn't even say 7-on-7. On the 11-on-11 drills, the first 3 days without pads, if they ran 10 plays, you'd be lucky if one was a running play. Simply because, there's no hitting, there's no tackling. The offensive, defensive line really are just sort of grabbing each other and dancing a little bit, not really trying to get past the offensive line, and the offensive line isn't exerting their, putting all their effort into stopping them because there's supposed to be no contact. So today was the first time when, pulling guards, pulling centers, and that sort of thing, and trap plays that came into effect that you could really see if they're working or not. And apparently McNichols had a good day. I believe Riley Allman tweeted out, there's still room on the McNichols train, but seats are filling up fast. And it was sort of like a pitch, and he went out and actually broke a couple tackles, and then spun out of another one. And I've been on record as this is the guy I want to see when training camp, because he could answer a lot of these questions where such a huge question mark at running back. Not that there's nobody there to run the ball. It's just sort of like everybody there wants to know what the pecking order is. But this guy can come a long way, and Jeremy McNichols can make a long way into the conversation if we need to carry 4 running backs after week 4, or have to carry 5 running backs, or the Bucs want to carry 5 running backs, or would make somebody like Charles Sims expendable, where you could trade him and maybe pick up another player, a depth player where you need it, or flat out get a draft pick for him. That would be a tall order for McNichols to do, to feel comfortable enough, because I believe Charles Sims in space is one of the best backs out there, and one-on-one, it's a real challenge to bring him down, let alone even touch him. But apparently he balled out today, so that was good to see. Sort of his first chance, because he was sort of invisible the first 3 days, and apparently he had a good day. That brings us to Stevie Tui Kolavatu. He's been a ghost, to be honest with you. The first 3 days I was there, I don't even think I noticed him. Silver Sigala was actually ahead of him in the rotation, sort of in their jumbo package. They were doing it was like a Baker, Siliga, Ayers, Golston package, I believe it was. Sort of like their run stopping, like a 3rd and 1 short yardage. Not necessarily goal line, because goal line, Baker, Siliga, CVT, probably all would have been in there. But sort of, like a 3rd and short sort of run stuffing package, not necessarily the cheetahs off the edges getting to the quarterback. So as of now, and it's nothing to panic about. Obviously, you would like to see these draft choices, especially ones with such a cool story as Stevie T, to show out early. But now that I've really thought about it, there'll be somebody I'll be paying special attention to on Wednesday to see where he's at and what's he doing. And I won't be watching the plays so much. I'll be watching him and sort of get a gauge where he's at, where he's having trouble, or maybe he's just doing, where he's doing a really good job, and they're not running the ball his way, and so things like that. So he'll be something I'll keep an eye on. So further updates for that. And as far as undrafted free agents, the only one who's making news, the only one who's sort of made news since he got here, is Anthony Auclair. His blocking seems to be better as advertised. There was a play where it was tweeted out that he pretty much stoned Noah Spence on a one-on-one, and then the next play he pancaked Devontae Lambert. It sounds like this guy's sort of in the mold of nastiness that J.R. Sweezy is, and the nastiness that Ali Marpet reports are saying that he's starting to get this year. And I said that's, way back when, that's the gene that's sort of going to keep this guy on the roster. So he still has lots of challenges as far as route running and things like that. He's definitely going to be a developmental player. As of right now, they're putting so much work into him. I think he might be a guy that's put on the team but maybe inactive for most weeks because they just don't think they can stash him on the practice squad. They love to stash him on the practice squad for this whole year. But I just don't think he's going to be able to. They'll be able to do that without somebody coming and plucking him off. So he might be somebody who's on the 53-man roster, but sort of week in, week out will be inactive because you have to inactivate 7 players. I think it is every week. Like you can only dress 46. I believe is the deal. Ryan Griffin has been on the 53-man roster for 2 years, and I don't think he's been active for 1 game. That brings us to the interviews. These are we found on Buccaneers.com. Dirk Cutter had a real good one this year. The questions that were asked of him were they did a good job. The beat reporters and maybe some of the national guys. I'm not really sure. You can't really tell until you get their voices down. You can't tell who asked each question. And some with Hard Knocks being there and the excitement of the team, you see a lot more. I guess media outlets there, like I think Fox 13's been there every day. Like Channel 10, Channel 8. They're sort of there at the beginning or on special occasions. Like they have the Hall of Fame, or not Hall of Fame, Ring of Honor press conference coming up pretty soon. And they'll show up for that. But sort of like day in, day out, those guys don't really show up every day, and nor they should. The news, the 6 o'clock news gets a 2-minute sports section, or 2-minute time to talk about sports, and they got to talk about all the sports, let alone, just the Buccaneers. So talking 2 minutes about the Buccaneers, I think this podcast is probably going to go 40 minutes, and I'm going pretty fast to it. So, trying to cap off too much of the Buccaneers, I really don't think it's, be able to pay a camera guy and a reporter to go out there every single day is profitable for the station. So you can see why they're not out there every day. But as of now, you see their microphones peeking in there, and then local radio stations are there and things like that. So the media coverage has been pretty good, staying strong unlike last year's. But the first thing that sort of caught my attention in the Dirk Cutter's interview, somebody said, sort of given the situation, is Jacquizz Rodgers ready to be the feature back for all 16 games? And Dirk Cutter was like, oh, he caught me off guard on that one, which also leads me to believe like they're not going to get rid of Doug Martin because Doug Martin's going to be back week 4, and that's how everyone's mind is set right now. But that was sort of why I wanted to bring that up. And then he paused for a second and thought, and he goes, "Well, yeah, he could, but it's a grinding position. You take a lot of punishment as a running back." And then sort of finished it off was, we've got a lot of depth there. We're going to be fine. So at the end, he just sort of blew off the question, but he was not expecting like, are you prepared for Jacquizz Rodgers to be your starting running back for 16 games? Obviously, he's not, because he wasn't ready for that question. So that kind of gets you. Might tell something to the mindset that's going on with Doug Martin again. Somebody asked him about Jacquizz Smith and his surgery he had a couple days ago, where he stood with that. Watching all these press conferences, I found this out early last year. If you're not on the field, Coach Cutter could care less. And not that he, doesn't hope you're recovering, but he doesn't waste his time in getting daily updates from the trainer about, how's Jacques Smith doing? When's he be back? When's he's back, he's back. That's when Dirk Cutter starts worrying about him again. Now he's on the field, he can play. Then he starts to pay attention to him. When he's off field and can't play, it's nothing mean. He just doesn't have time for him. It's something he doesn't care about. He trusts the trainers and that process. And when it gets done, then he'll worry about Jacquizz Smith, and it's something he said over and over. He's just kind of like, I don't know, all he said was that it went well and he's recovering, and when he's back, he's back. And he did reiterate that this is a weeks thing. This isn't a season-ending injury. So I'm sort of sticking to my prediction that he'll probably miss all the preseason games. He might be back before all the preseason games are over, but I don't think they want to risk him in it, especially like in the final preseason game when I sort of feel he's going to come back. But I think he's going to be ready week 1 versus the Dolphins. But we'll see. He also, Dirk Cutter did confirm that they've been swapping days as far as the 1 with the 2s, with the 2 Ryans, Ryan Griffin and Ryan Fitzpatrick. So once again, that battle is neck and neck right now. And if you took it off the first 3 days, Ryan Griffin would win the starting job. Now, that doesn't mean things would change, and the things that I see might not be the same things that Fitzpatrick sees. His intangibles might be outshine the lack of play that he's outplaying Griffin. Just in the fact somebody who's played that many years in the field, another sounding board that Cutter and Winston can sort of bounce off of. It was like, hey, Jameis, what did you see? And then Ryan could, be like, this is what I saw. Did you see this? And sort of like a three-headed monster helping Jameis, during the game instead of just Jameis and Cutter. Because Ryan Griffin knows the offense, but he doesn't, he hasn't seen the looks. He's never even played an NFL snap in a regular season game snap, so he hasn't seen the things, obviously, Ryan Fitzpatrick has. Cutter said Beckwith is also the most improved player. Now, it doesn't mean the best player, but he said he was really worried when he saw him in sort of like rookies and OTAs and he wasn't worried about the knee. He said he was just worried about his play. That was really rusty, and it's kind of like, ooh, God, Jason might have blown it on this one. Ooh, we traded up for him. Ooh, my God. But in these 4 practices, he says that from where he was, which is pretty low in the "ooh, my God, we made a mistake" sort of phase, into now he's been the most improvement from point A to now. Obviously, someone like Gerald McCoy, his starting point is so high, he doesn't really get much movement. But someone who started so low, but it's good to see that he's improving quickly. That means he's catching on to, he's recognizing mistakes and he's correcting when he's starting to get acclimated to the defense and catching on to the scheme, which is really great to hear for somebody, a third-round pick. And then I guess I should have brought this up earlier about the Jaquez Smith injury. Dirk Cutter went out of his way to sort of point out that Ryan Russell is somebody who will be in there to sort of take his place until he comes back, because he felt he did a good job and came on strong late last year. Other interviews: Deshaun Jackson, Kendall Beckwith actually had a short interview. Jacquizz Rodgers had a short interview. Those were on the field. Cutter's and Deshaun Jackson's were actually in front of the banner, like the Buccaneers backdrop with the flag on it. Deshaun Jackson, I didn't really get anything out of Deshaun Jackson. He's been in the league 10 years. He's probably been interviewed how many times, because he's been the star, one of the stars on an NFL team probably since the day he got there. He was a new flashy rookie his first year, and by the time that sort of faded away, he was already producing the NFL. So he wasn't an instant star, but by the time the shine of being a first round draft pick sort of faded off, he'd already established himself as a good player in the NFL and then gone up from there. So he's real smooth in his answers. The only thing I can say was somebody asked, him and sort of rattled off the weapons, and he's like, "What do you think of this offense?" And you could see his whole face lit up for like a half beat, and he smiled and he's like, "Explosive," And then he went right back into his lots of weapons, happy to be here, do what I can. This player's a good player, that player's a good player. This is one of the better defense I've ever faced. Iron sharpens iron, all that kind of stuff. So, but if you want to watch those other 3 interviews, they're on Buccaneers.com. And the last thing I want to get to is Insider Live, the show that has Scott Smith and Casey Phillips. They do it live. They do it almost all year round, but they do it live from training camp every single day, and I think that's where I found them last year. And they started doing, near the tail end of last year's training camp, they started doing like these scouts. They're having personnel people, team scouts on, and they sort of ask these questions, and you really get to learn sort of the things you wanted to know, like sort of like what a scout schedule is, and how the Bucs scout, what type of player the Bucs are looking for. I think I heard, I'm going to mess this up, but I heard yesterday, which yesterday was a really, really good one. I liked the first one, I believe, with Alex Smith, former tight end for the Buccaneers. He's just starting as a scout, and then yesterday they had another scout, and I don't remember his name, but he was really fun to listen to. He had his answers, and it was almost like he knew the questions, and he was popping them off, his answers off, and he was really well spoken and very insightful. It was really fun to listen to him talk and answer those questions from Scott and Casey. I think he said something like Buck traits, I believe was what he said. they're always sort of tweaking how he said their evaluation grades. Maybe dropping down. I don't know. Social skills a tick. Social skills only count for, maybe, now it's like the top score for social skills could only be 9 instead of 10, or I don't even know what I'm talking about. But so they kind of tweaked that. But then he said Bucks traits. They look for players, and it sounded like one of the first things they do before they even take the next step is, does he have these traits that Jason Licht looks for as a player to be a Buccaneer? And I thought that was really cool to listen to. But today they had Mike Greenberg on, the capologist, plus lots of other things that he sort of take care of. And I'm a big fan of Mike Greenberg because he's setting this team up for success. You sort of look at a team like the New Orleans Saints, who's they've sort of been in salary cap hell, and they've been in salary cap hell from a while now, probably a handful of years, where it seems like they're always it's just never working out for them, and they keep writing bad contract after bad contract. And I believe it's one of the biggest reasons why they have a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback, and they've been 7-9 3 years in a row. You're wasting these guys' years because the front office just sort of can't get it together. Perfect example, and sometimes it's not their fault. Like this year, they brought Nick Fairley on a prove-it deal, a defensive tackle Nick Fairley, 1-year prove-it deal, and he did, and so they signed him back to a bigger contract, and now he, unfortunately for him, he came up with some sort of heart condition, and he might never play again. But a lot of it they've written bad contracts to players that sort of past their prime. Kind of reminds you of like what Daniel Snyder did when he first started owning the Redskins. He was just like writing checks. It's like, what? How many Pro Bowls do you have? Here's a check. I don't care if you're 37 years old. Things like that, and it just sort of never worked out. And that's why I'm such a fan of Mike Greenberg, is in the style that he does. The players' contracts are more on not really signing bonuses, but roster bonuses. And all the guaranteed money is big, but it's big in the first few years. So when the player's still young, and you think that, so they're getting like a huge payday up front, and they're still getting paid in the back, but none of that back money counts against the cap. All the guaranteed money is in the first, no matter how long, it matters how long the contract is, but it's in like the first 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, if it's a big like 7-year deal like McCoy got, something like that. So those later years, if something does happen, or the play dramatically drops off, or they find somebody who's younger and better, they can cut that player, and there's no dead money. There's nothing against the cap. So they had him on today, and there was this question called salary cap rollover, where he said now with the new rules we can roll over money to the salary cap, and apparently you can roll over all that money. So these sort of narratives out there about Luke Stocker, they might cut Luke Stocker because his price tag compared to what he actually value he gives you on the field. Now, he's probably invaluable in the tight end room. He could probably coach the tight end room. He's been here so long and been a tight end in the league so long. But I always thought in my mind, when people say, yeah, well, you get that money back, and I'm thinking, well, what's it matter? Because, the salary cap's already set. It doesn't matter if they don't have him this year, because they've already, okay, you get $4 million back this year for your salary cap because you cut Luke Stocker, but there's no one to give that $4 million to. So yes, you're saving the Glazers money, but it's not really helping as far as the cap-wise till I guess it does now. So if you get rid of that $4 million, you can roll that space over into next year. So now those, maybe other people knew this as they were talking about, sort of those narratives about cutting players that, older players with bigger salaries, already knew that, but it always didn't really sort of make sense to me, because, who are you going to give the money to this year and next year, but now if you can roll over all the money you didn't use into next year's, I can start to really see the benefit of pulling something off. And during Bucks Insider, they actually turned around and, because no one else tweeted this out or talked about it, and a lot of people, want to know what's going on with the punt return job. And I wasn't sure if it was punt return or kick return. They didn't really make it clear on Insider Live, but it was sort of going on when the question was answered, and they spun around. And who was back there today was Ryan Smith, the second string outside corner. Josh Huff, who that was the reason they brought him onto the team last year. It turned a little bit of a disaster. And surprisingly, Chris Godwin was back there. He might make himself too valuable to put back there very soon, but at least for a day, he was back there returning punts and or kickoffs. They didn't really make it clear at that. And lastly, I just want to give a shout out to Scott Smith on NFL, Insider Live, presented by Miller Lite. He actually mentioned my article that I wrote for whatthebuck.net a couple days ago that went up out there. It was an opinion puff piece, is what I like to call it. It was I don't want to call it a silly article, but I'm not going to find myself a hard edge reporter, but I like to sort of talk about stuff that you can prove one way or the other. But I kept hearing people talk about, this is the best roster ever. Is this the best roster ever? Is it the best roster ever? So at first I thought it was laughable. I'm like, well, you got to put up against the 2002 Super Bowl champions. So I sort of made this article, and I made it like like boxing, where it's a 10-point must system. So if like Brad Johnson, Jameis Winston, that would be like a 10-9 round. But if it was like ridiculously spread, sort of Keith Tandy and Chris Conte against Dexter Jackson and John Lynch, that's like a 10-8 round. And that's how I did it. That's how I scored it. To keep it simple and then not have to let's see, I give John Lynch and the safeties a 10 out of 10, but where exactly do I put Tandy and Conte? Are they 5 out of 10? Are they 6 out of 10? And instead of making so much, make it wishy-washy, it just had to be 10-9 or 10-8. And the only 10-8 round I had were the safeties. So it really didn't blow it out of the water. And then I did depth, but only depth that people were substitute into regularly. So like quarterback, I didn't do depth at quarterback or offensive line or linebackers, things like that. It was wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, and defensive line. And sort of what really tipped the scales was where this year's roster has very good depth. It's at the places where you do substitute a lot, where they're very thin, like corner, possibly safety, but backup linebackers really unproven. The backup offensive line, even though I like their depth as a unit, is sort of unproven. Let's see, where is that? I guess everywhere else, yeah, they're pretty good. So the 2017 team really scored high in the depth category, and they end up coming from behind and winning, which was shocking to me. So basically my scoring system allowed the 2017 team to hang with the 2002 team. But to get around what I was saying, somebody tweeted in that question, live on there, like, I've been watching Bucks football, my whole entire life. Is this the best team we've had? And I guess Scott Smith had read my article, and he sort of brought it up and talked about it, and he came to sort of the same conclusion that I did, or I have, even though the 2017 team won by 1 point in my article, that a lot of it was projection. I know what Derek Brooks and Shelton Quarles did. If I project out what Levante David might do and what Quan Alexander might do, you can make a real strong argument that they're better. As of right now, it's like, no. The only the spot that hurt, I guess, the 2002 team was how Monty Kiffin doesn't really rotate his defensive linemen. It was sort of the same 4 guys, and the only person that would rotate at all would be Anthony McFarland was Booger, and as Jay Hayes is constantly rotating these guys, so there's a lot, there's a lot of specialists. They have a lot more depth. the starting four, the 2002 team was, hands down better. With they have a Hall of Famer, and in my opinion, and a lot of Buccaneers' opinion, Simeon Rice, who should be a Hall of Famer. I mean, Gerald McCoy, you could argue, is the best football player on the team, and he would be the third best lineman on that team. And it's not a knock against him. It's just, Warren Sapp was one of the greatest tackles ever of all time, and just happened to play for the Buccaneers as Gerald McCoy does. And Simeon Rice is just a better pass rusher. What Simeon Rice did, I believe, outweighs what Gerald McCoy does at tackle. His specialty is more important to the overall success of a defense than Gerald McCoy's specialty, who has somebody right next to him who's better at that specialty. So that's how it worked out. But he brought the article up because I guess he had just read it when Casey ran that question. It's like, he the best of all time. And so to wrap this very long diatribe up, it was all about potential for this roster than last year, but it's really nice to have this team in the conversation. So that's going to wrap it up. I want to remind everybody to listen to this. We are recording the Pewtercast tonight. Our special guest is Trevor Sikkema. So if you want to get those last little emails into at thepewtercast@gmail.com, email your comments, and we'll get them in there for the listener interaction section. Thank you so much for listening. This was probably a one-time shot because this is supposed to be a Fan of the Sands thing, but since it was first day one and there was so much new stuff coming out, I just want to get on here and sort of tell you what's going on. But Wednesday, tomorrow's no practice at all, and I'll be out there Wednesday, and then a new episode will drop Wednesday. I guess I'll call it episode 4, and this is just a bonus episode. So until then, you know what to say. Go Bucks.